Takai. Chapter 4. The days passed as normal for Kukuri. Her routine was simple. Wake up, prepare for the day, meditate, and begin her training. Day in and day out, it was the same thing. She didn't mind, though. She enjoyed a steady routine and a structured schedule. Walking to the meditation chamber, she was surprised to see that Danwi was not there. This was strange to her. Danwi was always there bright and early each morning to begin their lessons. Stepping outside the chamber, she looked around and heard voices from around the corner. It sounded like Master Elan and Danwi. Kukuri listened carefully, knowing that eavesdropping was wrong, but curious as to why these two friends would be meeting at this moment with hushed voices.
You are certain of this?
I trust Dooku's insight. If he's correct, Bala Shud has his goons smuggling dangerous creatures through the lower levels.
What kind of creatures?
It could be anything. Rathars, Acklays. I wouldn't put it past that bloated Hutt to try and get his hands on a juvenile rancor. Regardless, it's a cause for concern.
Is it? Donway, I feel your history with Bala Shud is working against your better judgment. Even if he got his hands on these beasts, his influence in the underworld is minimal at best. It may be better to contact Coruscant Security and let them investigate.
I did contact them 3 days ago. They've lost contact with the men they sent to investigate. You know as well as I do that Bala Shud's men aren't afraid to draw their blasters if they feel threatened by the law. But a few lightsabers pointed at them might just give us the information we need to find out where he's hiding.
I don't like this line of thinking, Donway. Say Dooku's sources are wrong. Best case scenario, we go down there and find nothing. We are back here at square one. Worst case, we find ourselves in more trouble than we bargained for. The underworld of Coruscant isn't exactly full of Jedi supporters, after all.
If we keep a low profile, I know we can find out what's happening.
Elan raised his eyebrow.
Donway, do I look like someone who can keep a low profile on any planet?
Danwi looked at the massive, imposing stature of his friend and scratched his head.
Point taken. But still, I don't feel this is something we can turn our backs to.
Let me speak to Master Rancisis. I trust his judgment on such matters. In the meantime, perhaps you should get back to teaching cookery.
Elan looked over his shoulder.
Perhaps a lesson in the dangers of eavesdropping.
Kukuri's face turned red as she slowly stepped out from around the corner. Elan looked at her with a slight smirk.
At the very least, a lesson in stealth.
Kukuri, were you listening in on a private conversation?
Sorry, Master. I was just curious.
Elan smiled and walked past Kukuri.
Curiosity is a wonderful thing, but it's best to make sure it doesn't lead you into trouble.
Patting her shoulder, Elan made his way down the temple halls as Danwi sighed and shook his head.
Come on. It's late as it is. Let's head to the training grounds.
Kukuri nodded her head and followed alongside her master as they passed a few other knights and masters on their way to the training grounds.
Master? Who is Bala Shud?
Never you mind, Kukuri.
But you seem to talk about him like he's dangerous. Are we in trouble?
Danwi sighed.
If you must know, Bala Shud is a Hutt. He was exiled from the Hutt Syndicate years ago. He still maintains a position of some power, however. Enough to cause me a great deal of concern.
So, why doesn't someone arrest him?
It's easier said than done. Bala Shud was imprisoned years ago by myself and a few other members of the Order. Sadly, Bala Shud has ways of slipping through the cracks, like the slimy vermin he is.
Sheesh. What exactly did he do, anyway?
Never you mind. Come.
Master and student made their way to the training grounds and threw off their robes. Danwi stepped into the training circle and withdrew his shimmering green lightsaber as Kukuri withdrew her weapon.
Watch my movements. Form 4 is acrobatic and graceful in its movements. If, however, executed without precision and discipline, you might as well be practicing cartwheels.
Kukuri nodded obediently and observed as her master executed a perfect sequence of acrobatic slashes, She was always amazed at how Donwee, even past his prime, was able to execute such graceful movements. Donwee stood and straightened his long black hair and stood aside.
Your turn. Remember, be light on your feet, but stay grounded. Keep your balance and stay focused.
Kukuri stepped into the center of the circle and held her lightsaber in her hands, activating the blade with a snapping hiss. Taking deep breaths, she focused and leapt forward, attempting the same movements as Donwee. While she executed the technique correctly, she could tell from Donwee's stern expression that she still had work to do.
Good effort, but you're too tense. Relax your muscles. Let your actions flow naturally.
How am I supposed to do that?
You're thinking too much.
But you said to concentrate.
You're focusing too much on the movements. You know the steps, but you're preoccupied with making sure that you don't mess up. You're a smart young woman, Kukuri. Don't doubt yourself. Try again. This time, remember to breathe. The Force is your ally. It will guide you. Deep breaths. Loosen up.
Kukuri nodded and took her stance again and attempted the sequence again, only to trip over her own feet and fall forward as her saber clattered on the stone floor. Donwee shook his head.
Too loose. Let's try a new approach.
Kukuri sighed and straightened her hair back into a ponytail.
Close your eyes. I want you to think of something that calms you. Something that you long to see.
Kukuri closed her eyes and concentrated.
Do you see it?
Kukuri very slowly nodded and held her saber at the ready.
Again.
Kukuri once more attempted the sequence, this time pulling it off flawlessly before opening her eyes and turning to her master.
Excellent. What was it that you saw?
Kukuri thought for a moment.
It was a man and a woman. They were wearing white robes. They looked so happy. I wanted to know what they were so happy about.
Donwee scratched his head and sighed softly.
Let's move on.
Kukuri tilted her head in confusion.
But I haven't gotten it down just yet.
You're doing just fine. Now let's move on.
Donwee turned and led Kukuri to the obstacle course. For the better part of an hour, she ran through the course until she was certain she could do it in her sleep. While taking a short break to grab some water, she looked across the training grounds and saw Dravok. He was training with Master Elan standing nearby. She watched closely as the young man's messy black hair swung back and forth with each movement of his body. She didn't know why, but she found herself staring at him longer than she intended to.
Kukuri.
Kukuri's attention quickly snapped back to Donwee.
Focus on your training first, then you can talk to Kyril.
Yes, Master. Sorry.
By the early afternoon, Kukuri had finished her lessons and was wiping her face with a towel.
Good work today, Kukuri. We should start focusing on some more advanced techniques pretty soon.
Kukuri nodded.
Yes, Master. I'll take notes of what I learned today.
Very good. I will speak to you later. I have business to attend to. You're dismissed.
Kukuri bowed to her master and approached Dravok, who was balancing on his hands on the obstacle course. Elan stood nearby, a stoic expression on his face.
Master Elan?
Elan turned and looked down at the young woman.
Jonshua, Kukuri. What can I do for you?
I was wondering if you had a moment to talk.
Of course. Kyril, that's enough for now. Fetch yourself some water.
Dravok dropped to his feet and stretched out his arms, looking out the side of his eyes at Kukuri as he stepped past her.
Now, what would you like to discuss, Kukuri?
It's about Bala Shud.
Elan stared at Kukuri sternly.
You shouldn't be involving yourself in such matters, Kukuri.
I know, but Master Donwee seems to really despise him. I'm just wondering why.
Elan sighed and removed a piece of fluff that was stuck to one of his antlers.
I'm afraid it's not my place to discuss that with you. What I can tell you is that Bala Shud was responsible for the deaths of many people, one of whom was very dear to Donwee.
That's awful.
Indeed it is. Donwee has struggled to let go of his anger against Bala Shud. Hence why he was insistent on involving himself in the dealings of Bala Shud's men in the lower levels.
I see. What are we going to do about it?
We? Kukuri, even if we were to involve ourselves, your involvement is out of the question.
What? Why?
Many reasons. You are a Padawan. You have yet to learn much of what is required of you. And the last thing either of us want is to see you in danger.
But I want to help.
I understand that, as does your master. However, this is not a matter with which you need to concern yourself. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must speak to Master Rancisis.
Kukuri sighed as Elan walked past her. She felt like a child being kept in the dark. She knew that she could help if they just let her.
Kukuri?
Dravok walked over to Kukuri, straightening his tunic.
Something wrong?
I'm okay. I overheard Master Donwi and Master Elan talking about some hut named Balashud. He seems like bad news, but they won't let me help.
Help with what?
Kukuri turned to Dravok.
Apparently, some of his guys are in the lower levels, smuggling dangerous creatures through. If the three of us went down there together, I know we could find out what's happening.
Dravok raised an eyebrow.
The three of you? What, am I not good enough?
Kukuri looked at him.
Well, I didn't want to speak for you, but now that you mention it, you might be able to help too. You seem like you could blend in easily in a place like the lower levels.
Dravok rolled his eyes.
How flattering. Look, we don't have a say in the matter, Kukuri. We're Padawans. Believe me, I'd love to bring some justice to those slums, but that's not our decision to make. Face it, Princess. You're stuck here.
Kukuri sneered at Dravok as he walked away from her. Later that evening, the sun had set as Donwi stood on the front steps of the Jedi Temple, his hood hanging over his face. Checking his belt, he made sure he had everything he needed and started to walk forward, until he heard a disapproving grunt.
Going somewhere, Dunway?
I'm not waiting any longer, Elan. If I don't act now, something bad is going to happen. I can feel it. I'm going down there to investigate myself.
Elan stepped over to his friend, towering over him.
You really aren't going to let this go, are you?
No. No, I'm not.
Elan rolled his eyes and sighed.
You're gonna need backup then. I will accompany you. Just remember, friends though we are, I am still your superior. If I decide we need to abort the mission, then we abort. Is that clear?
Donwi nodded.
Crystal clear. Come on.
Elan followed Donwi down the steps. From the shadows, however, Kukuri watched from behind a large pillar of stone and started making her way after them.
What are you doing out here?
Kukuri's heart skipped a beat as she saw Dravok walking over to her.
I'm going with them.
I told you this is a bad idea.
Then what are you doing out here?
Dravok struggled to come up with an answer as Kukuri smirked.
Oh, I see. You wanted to follow them too, didn't you?
Don't be ridiculous. I was just out for a walk.
Kukuri raised her eyebrow.
Really? A walk? With all your gear?
Dravok sighed in frustration as Kukuri smirked.
Look, we can help them. Just follow me and stay close. We can't let them know we're tagging along. Otherwise, we won't figure out what's going on down there.
Dravok glared.
Fine, but I'm taking the lead.
Dravok walked past her as Kukuri followed. When they reached the landing platform, they saw Elan and Donwi take off in their speeder.
We don't have the clearance codes for the speeders.
Dravok smiled and pointed to a swoop bike.
Don't need codes for one of those. Hop on and hold on tight.
Dravok hopped on and grabbed the handlebars as Kukuri groaned and reluctantly held on to Dravok.
Comfortable back there, Princess?
Just follow them, you dolt.
With a smirk, Dravok took the speeder bike forward, as the two Padawans followed after their masters.